You ever heard a song and think, wait, I know that beat from somewhere? That's because you probably do. That 6-second drum break from the Winston's Amen Brother has been used in over 3,000 songs across funk, hip hop, and drums and bass. In this documentary, we're going to trace how that single sample and others like it completely transformed music as we know it. From block parties in the Bronx where DJ Kool Herc first isolated drum breaks in 1973, to billion-dollar lawsuits that change how artists create today. You know that merry-go-round technique DJ Kool Herc invented? That wasn't just some party trick. It literally changed how we make music forever. Back in 1973, a Jamaican-born DJ in the Bronx was doing something nobody else had tried before. Clive Campbell, better known as DJ Kool Herc, noticed something that would transform music history. People on the dance floor went crazy during the drum breaks of songs. Instead of letting those moments pass, he figured out a way to extend them. What Herc did was actually pretty simple. He got 2 copies of the same record, played them on different turntables, and when the break came on the first record, he switched to the same break on the second record. That let him loop that drum beat for as long as he wanted. He wasn't thinking about starting a revolution or anything. He was just trying to keep people dancing longer at those Bronx block parties. Nobody in that room realized this simple technique will completely transform music production. This became known as the merry-go-round technique, and it changed everything. It wasn't just about extending breaks, it was about isolating specific parts of songs, the parts that hit hardest. Herc wasn't sampling in a way we think about it today with digital equipment, but he was isolating and repurposing parts of existing songs, the fundamental concept behind sampling. One of the first records Herc used for his merry-go-round technique was Apache by the Incredible Bongo Band. This instrumental track had a drum break that Herc recognized as pure gold, and he used it so much that he started calling it the national anthem of hip-hop. Just think about that. One drum break from this obscure track has been sampled in over 700 songs since then. From Sugar Hill Gang's Apache to Nas's Made You Look to Mob's Body Rock, this single sample crossed genre boundaries nobody expected. Just this one break connected hip-hop pioneers to electronic music producers to pop artists decades later. It wasn't just borrowed, it was transformed into something new each time. Another gold mine was James Brown's Funky Drummer Break with Clyde's Stubblefield iconic groove. This single drum pattern became the backbone for Public Enemy's Fight the Power, LA Cool J's Mama Said Knock You Out, and hundreds of other tracks. Stubblefield's 20-second solo might be the most valuable drum performance in history, but like many original artists, he didn't see royalties from all those samples. What's crazy is that early sampling wasn't even about having fancy technology. It was about creativity with limited tools. DJs would physically travel to other countries just to find rare records with unique breaks. They'll guard their collection, covering up record labels during performances so other DJs couldn't steal their sources. Some even soak labels off of vinyl records to keep their samples secret. As time went on, sampling evolved from turntables to tape loops to digital tech, but the core principle stayed the same, taking something old and giving it a new life and context. Producers went from manually splicing tape with razors to program digital samples like the Akai MPC, which completely changed the game in the late 80s and 90s. The EMUSP 1200 became another legendary sampling machine with only 2.5 seconds of sampling time. Instead of seeing this as a limitation, producers used it as a creative fuel. They'll pitch samples up to fit more audio in, accidentally creating the pitch-up sound that defined a lot of 90s hip-hop. Public Enemy's production team, the Bomb Squad, will layer dozens of tiny samples to create dense soundscapes nobody had heard before. This is how producers went from literally cutting tape to using digital tools. Necessity drove innovation, and those constraints actually sparked more creativity. The early samplers didn't have much memory, so producers had to get creative with what they had. They couldn't sample whole songs, so they focused on finding the perfect few seconds. While producers were hunting for those perfect few seconds of sound, there was one drum break that would transcend everything else. A 6-second loop that built entire musical movements. while its creators died penniless, never knowing he had changed music forever. It all started with a B-side in 1969. The Winstons, a soul group that most people have completely forgotten about today, recorded a track called Amen Brother. Nobody paid much attention to it at the time. It wasn't even their main single, but hidden in that track was a short drum solo by Gregory Coleman that would go on to become something nobody could have predicted. This wasn't just another break, it was a break that launched entire musical cultures. When you hear it, it doesn't sound revolutionary at all, just a clean, punchy drum pattern with a distinct flow. But something about these 6 seconds struck a chord with producers decades later. You gotta understand, Gregory Coleman, the man behind this legendary break, never saw a cent from any of this. While his drum solo was being used in thousands of tracks, Coleman had no idea of his impact. The man who created possibly the most influential piece of recorded music in history ended up homeless, passing away in 2006, without ever knowing that his work had become the foundation for multiple music scenes across the world. The Amen break started showing up in hip-hop tracks around the late 80s, but the real transformation happened when it crossed the Atlantic. UK producers got a hold of this break and started doing things nobody had tried before. They didn't just loop it, they completely reimagined what it could be. By speeding up Coleman's drums and splicing them into tiny fragments, they accidentally gave birth to jungle music. Then, as they pushed these manipulations further, drums and bass emerged, an entire genre built on variation of this single 6-second break. We're talking about whole club cultures, fashion styles, and communities that formed around this sound, all from a B-side drum solo. But that's not all. What's crazy is how versatile these same 6 seconds prove to be. Take that exact same break, slow it down instead of speeding it up, run it through some filters, and suddenly you got the backbone of tri-hop. Artists like Massive Attack and Portishead use variation of Amen break to create a completely different vibe. Something moody, atmospheric, and perfect for 90s Bristol coffee shops instead of high energy raves. Think about that. The exact same 6 seconds of drums creating two completely opposite musical movements. That's the magic of sampling. It's not just about copying, it's about transformation. Even today, more than 50 years after Coleman recorded that solo, you can still hear the DNA of the Amen break all over modern music. EDM producers, trap artists, they're still finding new ways to flip those same 6 seconds. The break has been pitched, stretched, reversed, and chopped in ways Coleman could have never imagined when he sat down at his drum kit. What makes this whole story even more wild is that while this break was revolutionizing music across multiple continents, the legal system was struggling to catch up. Producers were creating entirely new sounds and genres by manipulating these samples, but the copyright law wasn't designed for this kind of musical recycling. As sampling became more mainstream, artists started facing lawsuits from record labels and original creators. The creative freedom that gave birth to these genres was now under threat. So when we talk about sampling, we're actually diving into a deep philosophical debate. Some people view it as a beautiful way to preserve cultural heritage, taking those forgotten sounds and giving them new life. Others see it as straight up appropriation, where cultures get turned into commodities for profit. This tension is what makes sampling so fascinating. It's not just about the technical side of chopping up beats. Every time a producer samples a track, they're participating in this complex conversation about who owns sounds, who gets to transform it, and what it means when one culture borrows from another. The beauty of sampling is that it forces us to confront these questions. When you hear that familiar loop in a brand new context, you're witnessing more than just a production technique. You're experiencing the living, breathing evolution of our shared musical language. That's the true power of sampling. It blurs the lines between creator and curator, past and present, preservation and innovation.